Hi everyone, welcome back to Tallulah Talks. It is Wednesday, which means it's time for our favourite day of the week, Killer Wednesday. Today's... I didn't realise how controversial it was because I didn't realise that anyone thought she was innocent. So essentially who we're going to talk about today is Lucy Letby, who is a child serial killer who has recently been found guilty of, I believe it's 7 counts of murder and 15 counts of attempted murder, and she's currently serving life in prison. So I think what people seem to think is that she was set up, it was all done by the hospital, blah blah blah. But what they don't know or haven't bothered to research is that a doctor had initially brought Lucy up to hospital management for just the amount of babies that were getting really sick and dying in her care. This was actually brought up to hospital management 3 different times to investigate. I think they did like a small investigation and they basically put it down to a coincidence. So they were actually on Lucy's side. And this was between, I think it was like the start of 2016 and the start of 2017. And again, 3 different times in front of hospital management. And it was only after the 3rd time that the police were brought in. So it's not as if they thought, oh, Lucy's been, during all these crashes and deaths of babies, and so we're going to use her as a scapegoat. That's not how it went down. And I think because there was like no red flags, so to speak. But we will move on to that. So Lucy was born on the 4th of January 1990 and she grew up in Hereford, West Midlands in the UK. She was born to John Letby, who was a furniture salesman, and Susan Letby, who was an accounts clerk. Lucy was an only child. It was known that she lived a very middle-class life, and she was pretty much given everything she could have wanted. Her parents gave her plenty of love, plenty of attention. She had a really good education, and the family were never really known to struggle financially. So typically in these types of cases, the home life of the perpetrator is, there's abuse going on or there's financial struggles, but none of that was present for Lucy. Lucy was, described as quite a happy child. She was said to be obsessed with Disney princesses, especially Snow White. Snow White was her favourite. It's also said that she loved cats, and at school she had a really good group of friends. She wasn't necessarily a loner. She was shy, she was quiet, but again, it was nothing that would indicate, her behaviour in later years. Lucy knew from a young age that she wanted to work with children, and friends actually nicknamed her Mary Poppins because of this career that she wanted to pursue. Lucy did maintain this dream into her teenage years, and she attended a high school before going to college during her last year. She chose A-levels, which would collaborate with what she wanted to do at university, and she did go on to university, and she was the first in her immediate family to attend. She attended the University of Chester to study nursing, and it is said that she loved university, she loved her roommates, she loved going out with her friends, and she loved studying. Lucy never partied. She dedicated all her time to studying because this was something she really wanted to do. She also took placement throughout the years at the Countess of Chester hospital. She spent her placements in the NICU wards because that is what she wanted to do, and on her final year she moved her course to child nursing. She went on to graduate with really good honours, and her parents were said to be very proud of her. However, they were slightly disappointed that she was going to stay in Chester rather than coming home to Hereford. Lucy did want to continue her job at Chester Hospital. Obviously it was a placement, but she wanted to get a job there. And again, her parents did initially believe she would move back, but they were still very proud of her. Lucy did feel guilty about this. She did feel she was like abandoning her parents. However, she did say that her parents could be very suffocating. She was very excited, and she did eventually get a job at her dream hospital, the Countess of Chester Hospital, where she worked on the neonatal unit. Her job specifically was looking after the poorly babies, and she actually began a training program which the hospital would have put her forwards for, to basically teach nurses how best to look after these babies. Over the next few years, Lucy did seem to have a very good life. There was no signs that she was a killer. She bought a home in Chester. She lived alone, but she did have a close-knit group of friends. They were mostly nurses, and she spent a lot of time with those friends. They would go out for drinks. They would go on annual holidays to Ibiza. She was just described as having a very social life and being a very social person. She even attended salsa lessons and joined a local pub quiz team. So it's not like she was a loner. It's not that she didn't have any friends. She was very active within her social life. She had her home decorated the way she wanted it to. Many people described it as childish because she had Disney ornaments, or she had, teddies on her bed or whatever. But I feel like we're similar. That is only way we're similar. I have Disney ornaments all over my house. I have pictures of Disney princesses, things like that. She remained single throughout her early 20s, which I suppose is, there's nothing wrong with that, but, unfortunately, within society, it is seen as a little, odd. She did dream, however, about having a family of her own, husband and children, but again, her main focus at this point was her career, and she was only like 25 by this point. She would take any shifts that were going, and she even did extra placement at the Liverpool Women's Hospital. She was featured in a local newspaper holding a baby grow, and the article basically stated that she enjoyed observing babies grow and assisting families and just being compassionate, and she just loved her job. She also actually began a fundraiser for the new baby ward unit at her hospital, which actually raised like £3 million. She was again featured on the billboard for this, and she loved everything that she did. So it baffled everyone when this all came out. By 2015, Lucy had now completed her training on how to care for NICU babies, and she was then allowed to work with these babies, I guess on her own, because it was like nurses who would take care of specific babies, and that was their baby. It's like, in childcare you have children that are your group, so I think it was very much like that. The killings did seem to come out of nowhere because, again, there was no previous red flags, but she had already worked there for like a year and there was no issues. But this is just my personal opinion, but I think that she was essentially biding her time. She wanted people to trust her, and then obviously once this training was done, that's when she could really make these babies ill. That's just my personal opinion. No one said anything about that, but that's just, like, if I was going to do that, that's how I would do it, without sounding horrible, because I wouldn't ever do that, but just getting into her frame of mind, you don't want to be caught out straight away. So if it's something you want to keep on doing, you would bide your time. So she began working on the neonatal unit, and she passed her training in the March of 2014. So in the unit there were approximately 30 nurses kind of round the clock, and they were caring for the sick babies. Chester Hospital, there was a study or something conducted, and they cared for thousands of sick babies, and on average there were only 3 per year that were recorded that would unfortunately pass away due to complications or whatever. So and even actually as a statistic for the UK, it's not, it's not a high percentage of babies that pass away within even like the first year. So this was very odd for them. In June of 2015, this all changed, and Lucy's training that she had done basically involved how to insert IVs properly, and they were warned of air bubbles that could possibly get into the IVs. And this was actually like in the May of 2015. 2 weeks after her training is pretty much when things started to go wrong, and at this time a pregnant woman was admitted. Now, I don't know their names. In the papers and stuff, the babies just go by letters, so baby A, baby B, baby C. And so that's what I'll be referring to them as. There will be no pictures of these babies. There won't, there's no pictures that I could find of these babies anyway. So, yeah, that's how we're going to do that. The woman was admitted due to concerns of her blood pressure. It was quite high, and she was approximately 31 weeks pregnant. A decision was basically made for her to deliver her twins by C-section, and everything went really well. The first twin was a boy who weighed 3 pounds and 12 ounces, and the second one was a girl who weighed 3 pounds and 11 ounces. So I'm going to refer to them as baby A and baby B. Or twin A, twin B. So yes, they were classed as premature babies because they were born like 9 weeks early, and they were immediately taken to the neonatal unit, where there were 4 different nurseries. So the first 2 nurseries were for the critical babies, and 3 and 4 were they didn't need as much care. Twin A and Twin B were taken to nursery 1, I believe, just to kind of make sure they were okay, because again, they weren't supposed to be born this early. Letby was then assigned these twins, and on June 8th, 2015, Twin A was showing improvement. He was able to breathe on his own, and he was considered stable by the doctors. At 8 p.m, this was when Lucy began her shift, and by 8:15, Lucy was left alone with the twins. As she was setting up a glucose drip, Twin A allegedly stopped breathing, and nurses and doctors rushed into the nursery and gave CPR with the parents standing by watching, because obviously they were told about their baby's condition. Twin A was said to have gone pale, and purple blotches appeared on his skin, which doctors couldn't really figure out why this was happening. And unfortunately, by 8:58 p.m, Twin A did die. And it just made no sense, because he was stable, he was getting better, and he was absolutely fine until Lucy was left alone with him. Allegedly, well, not even allegedly, obviously everyone involved in the situation, nurses, doctors, they were all very devastated by what had happened, because they weren't expecting this to happen. But Lucy supposedly was very calm during this whole thing, and she actually came back on shift the next day, whereas typically, I think in that situation, the nurses take some time off. So she began another shift the next morning, and unfortunately, Twin B was actually born with complications. So the little girl had to be revived at birth, and she was placed on a ventilator. However, she, like her brother, had improved and was actually breathing on her own at this point. After losing their first twin, the parents were not leaving Twin B's side. Doctors were just baffled by the death of the first twin, and feared it could actually be linked to the mum's illness. I can't remember what the illness was, but she did have some sort of illness, and it's possible that it could have been genetic. So Letby, along with other nurses, did try and convince the parents to go home and get some rest. and they would keep them up to date with the second twins' condition. Approximately at 12:05 in the morning, Lucy actually spent time alone with Twin B, and she was helping a colleague who needed to leave the room for a few minutes, so she wasn't even supposed to be there. And again, moments later, after being left alone, Twin B actually stopped breathing, and like before, everyone rushed in trying to save this twin's life. And similar to her brother, her body was very pale, covered in splotches, and there was just no explanation. However, Twin B did live. They were able to resuscitate her. Thankfully, there were no lasting side effects, and from because I watched a YouTube video to get most of my information by Danielle Kirsty, and from what she had found and what I had seen, the baby is alive and doing very well. A post-mortem was carried out on the first twin. However, there was no cause of death put down because they couldn't find anything that could have caused the baby to die. And at this point, they wouldn't have been thinking to look for, like things like insulin poisoning or an air bubble being left or anything like that. They just assumed it was just an unfortunate thing that happened. It is alleged, like at that point, that Lucy had injected air into the glucose strip, and unfortunately the post-mortem just didn't pick that up, but I'm assuming it's because they weren't looking for it. And allegedly, I think this happened after every baby's death, but basically Lucy would make up these like memory boxes for the parents, which I just find it really odd. I don't know if she found some sort of excitement out of doing this because she had taken something from them, but it's weird. Just 5 days later, Lucy was actually told to take time off during this time because of the traumatic events that had happened. And she was also asked that when she came back to work in the nursery 3 and 4, where the babies weren't so critical and there was like less chance of something going wrong. Lucy, however, didn't like the idea of this, and she actually said this to the doctors, and she actually complained about this to her nursing colleagues and her nursing friends. And like I say, after complaining, she was allowed back in nursery 1 just 5 days later. On the 13th of June 2015, baby C was born prematurely, 10 weeks early, and unfortunately they also had pneumonia. However, the baby actually was responding well to treatment, and they were considered stable until Lucy arrived on shift later that evening. She was again supposed to be in another nursery for whatever reason, and the nurse who was looking after baby C actually left the room. And once again, as soon as the nurse returns, the alarms are going off and doctors and nurses are rushing in to try and save this baby. Lucy allegedly rushed to the baby's side as soon as the alarms went off. Fortunately, nurses were able to save him, and another kind of few hours go by, and one of the nurses, who was still in the room at this point, goes to do some work on the computer, so like her back's turned, and again the alarm goes off, and again Lucy is standing over this child while the nurse is in the room, by the way. I don't know if she got a bit of an adrenaline rush, like kind of doing it as someone else was in the room, kind of like, oh, you're not even going to catch me type thing. But like I say, CPR was performed over the course of 5 hours, and Lucy again was really calm during this whole thing, and allegedly she was actually told to leave this room while all this was going on, but she just kept finding excuses to come back. Unfortunately, on the morning of June 14th at 5:58 a.m, baby C was declared dead, and at this point it was found that, well, not at this point, later, Lucy had injected air into the baby's stomach. On the 21st of June 2015, baby D was put in nursery 1 due to complications from birth. Lucy was not designated to this baby at all, and she was actually looking after another baby in nursery 1. she... Oh, sorry, yeah, I'm getting mixed up. That's another thing, actually. She was looking after another baby in that unit, but she went for this baby, and that doesn't make sense to me. Why not? And I'm not wishing, death upon anyone, but it just makes you think, why would you choose that baby specifically? It just seems weird to me. Anyway, at 1:30 a.m, Baby D's assigned nurse had left the room and asked another nurse, not Lucy, to keep an eye on the baby. As the nurse returned, again, alarms were going off, and fortunately, the nurses were able to revive Baby D. Later in the night, the alarms did go off again, and again, Baby was able to be resuscitated, and yet again, when it came to kind of like early morning, Baby D stopped breathing for the third time. Unfortunately, at that point, the baby couldn't be saved, and they were declared dead at 4:30 a.m. on the 22nd of June of 2015. It was believed that Lucy had injected air into the bloodstream of this baby on the 3 separate occasions. In the days that followed, Lucy did continue to work as normal, which again everyone found really weird, because she wasn't distressed, she wasn't upset, she didn't seem to suffer any sort of trauma, and that's really weird to me. Like I said, it is normal for nurses and doctors to take time off after such traumatic events. However, Lucy never did. And this was when doctors in the hospital began to realise that there was one sort of similarity, one constant, when the baby's alarms were going off and they would eventually die. And that was that Lucy Letby was always alone with them, give or take. And actually, like I said before, a doctor took the findings to the director of nursing. They discussed what evidence there was. However, it was dismissed because they just didn't believe that it was Lucy. And allegedly at this time, she was texting her colleagues saying, quote, "I keep seeing them all in my head," end quote. And this was when she kind of gained sympathy for this. And she... she actually, I read, said to like her colleagues, "Oh, it's maybe just fate that these are things are supposed to happen." And this is where I think, because she did get the attention from her colleagues, it's possible. It's not been diagnosed. It's just my opinion that it is possible that she has Munchausen's by proxy. But again, that's just because she received a little bit of attention for it. That might not be the case at all, because she's not diagnosed. In August of 2015, 6 weeks after Baby D, Baby E and Baby F were another set of twins, and they were born 11 weeks early and diagnosed with quite a rare condition, and this meant that they grew at different rates. So on the 3rd of August, Lucy was the assigned nurse, and the parents from the get-go were uncomfortable with this. They basically just kind of said that Lucy was just always there, just always hovering over them and their children. And at one point, the parents left the room for whatever reason, and allegedly Twin E let out just this blood-curdling scream. And as Mum approached she had run into the room, approached the cot, and she saw blood coming from the baby's mouth, and Lucy was allegedly just at the computer, calm as ever, not even looking behind her, and just not paying attention. Now, I don't know about, I'm not a fan of kids, but if I hear a child screaming, I'm not just going to allow them to scream, especially when it's quite a distressed scream. So obviously the parents found this quite odd. So the mum rushed over to Lucy, who was said to just be acting very unbothered, and she allegedly said, quote, "It's just a bit of blood, probably from his feeding tube," end quote. Twin E at this point then began puking blood, and he was then rushed in. Doctors and nurses allegedly then rushed in to try and help him. And like previous babies before he had developed purple blotches all over his body. And after 2 hours, the doctors and nurses realised that his oxygen levels were unfortunately too low. And at 1:23 a.m, the efforts to revive him were stopped. And unfortunately, the baby died at 1:40 a.m. on August 4th. A post-mortem was meant to be carried out, however, after discussing it with the parents, they felt it might have been too soon and far too traumatic for the parents to go through this. And so they spent most of the morning trying to get twin F, the surviving twin, to a different hospital. And this failed due to no spaces being available, and so twin F unfortunately was left in the care of Lucy. Lucy would stop by the nursery again to have a chat, and again, these weren't her assigned babies at this point. And as the colleague was giving a drip to the twin F because his sugar levels were low, and so Lucy was helping with this. At 9 p.m, his levels dropped and doctors rushed in to stabilise him, and the drip was removed, and after this his condition did improve. Twin F did recover and was taken home. However, doctors couldn't figure out why his levels were so low or what went wrong, but again, it was later discovered when it came to trial and things, that twin F was giving large amounts of insulin. Baby G was born prematurely in May 2015, and it was said that there were issues with the placenta. So this caused her waters to leak, and at 26 weeks she was sent for checkups, and it actually turns out that her waters had broke, and she gave birth in a hospital bathroom, and she banged on these walls to get attention. And this wasn't at Chester Hospital, this was at a separate hospital. Doctors and nurses rushed to the scene, and they had a lot of issues with this baby. It had lung disease, jaundice, kidney and bowel issues. And at 13 weeks though, baby G was really improving, and he was then transferred to Chester Hospital because it was closer to his parents' house. On the 6th of September 2015, in Nursery 2, that was where the baby was placed. And September 7th, the hospital celebrated baby G's 100th day of life because he wasn't expected to live very long. Lucy began her shift at 8 p.m. that night, and it was her first night shift since her last attempt to kill a baby. And Lucy, again, was not the designated nurse. Baby G was very stable until his nurse went on a break. At 2 a.m, the alarms went off with Lucy standing over the baby, and the baby was just puking, projectile vomiting everywhere. Lucy at this point sat the baby up and put him on an oxygen mask because he was struggling to breathe. His stomach was swollen and really purple, and at 3:20 a.m, the decision was made to transfer the baby into intensive care. Lucy was then made the designated nurse, and doctors had removed air from the baby's stomach. They just weren't sure how it had got there. And they found later that it was Lucy that had overfed the baby and injected air straight into his stomach. So he was transferred back to his original hospital to try and get him improving again, and his condition again did improve. So after 8 days, he was then transferred back to Chester Hospital, and Lucy did attempt to kill him 2 more times. Fortunately enough, the baby lived. And the baby was allowed to go home on the 2nd of November. However, due to Lucy's actions, he was diagnosed with brain damage, and this led to cerebral palsy, which still affects him obviously to this day. Over the next few months, Lucy would go on to kill 3 more children, and it was alleged that when a co-worker had tried to help with one of the babies, Lucy basically told her off. And the nurse obviously found this quite weird. And so after being kind of reported to the hospital, sort of head of hospital, 3 different occasions, the police were finally involved. And the detectives said that they were called in to investigate a high number of baby deaths. It was found that during the investigation, Lucy was always present, and again, studies did show that like 2 to 3 babies died within a year. And, this was 7 babies that had died within the space of a year. It was just odd. Over the course of a year, Lucy had poisoned 2 babies, injected air into babies, overfed them, and tampered with their feeding tubes. Nearly all were attacked at night because Lucy was always mostly on night shifts. It was just easier to do that. And in victim reports, parents actually recall the babies getting worse when they left the room and when Lucy was alone with this baby. Dr. Stephen Brady had called a meeting, and he was told that Lucy was on duty for 3 of the deaths. In October 2015, 2 more babies had died, and again, Dr. Brady believed that Lucy was responsible. However, the unit manager dismissed this and just described it as an unfortunate coincidence. So it's not like they saw the babies die, Lucy was there, alright, okay, we need to get the police involved. It wasn't that at all. In February 2016, Dr. Jayaram saw Lucy standing over a baby as the baby stopped breathing, and again, Dr. Brady requested an urgent meeting, which was called 2 months later after 2 more babies had died. In June 2016, a baby had collapsed and 2 out of 3 triplets had died. And again, Lucy was present for all of these. She worked 3 more shifts before she was finally removed, and once this had happened, the deaths stopped. The hospital originally didn't want police involved because they didn't want to ruin their reputation. However, they couldn't just keep letting children die for the sake of a reputation. In February 2017, this was before Lucy was arrested, Lucy actually put in a grievance with the hospital, where the hospital were then forced to apologise. But again, by this point or later, babies were found to have been poisoned, and this was when Lucy was arrested. She didn't attend her sentence hearing, and she was sentenced to life imprisonment for the death of 7 babies and the attempted murder of 15 babies. And she is deemed the worst serial killer in the UK. So, what people think in that, they think that Lucy's just a scapegoat, is not the case. It took more than a year of doctors reporting her, holding meetings, trying to get her investigated before the police were even involved. I 100% believe that Lucy Letby is behind these deaths. I believe they found a journal where she had written something about the babies dying and how she didn't really feel bad about it. And although it's mostly just circumstantial evidence, it's pretty strong evidence. Her colleagues spoke out about her, the parents spoke out about her, obviously doctors had caught her, so I don't think it's one of those things where it's where she's used as a scapegoat. Absolutely not. She was kind of observed by psychologists who said that she is definitely a psychopath, due to not showing any guilt, not showing any remorse, and obviously for how she was acting when these babies were dying. Essentially, she was acting very calmly. She wasn't in any sort of rush to try and save the babies. She was just acting very odd. But again, it is my opinion that it is possible, along with psychopathy, that she possibly has Munchausen's by proxy, which, if you don't know what that means, it's essentially a caregiver who makes anyone under their care very ill, to the point where these babies or the people in their care will die, and essentially it's to get attention. It's not a very understood mental illness, but yeah, so I definitely think Lucy Letby is guilty, especially with all the kind of circumstantial evidence. And regardless whether you think she's innocent or not, that's that's your prerogative. You have your own opinions. But like I said, if it was a situation where it was just a scapegoat, police would have been brought in right away, investigation would have been done right away. Hospital staff, the managers wouldn't be saying like, oh no, Lucy wouldn't do that, she's a really nice girl. And that's why she got away with it for so long, because no one suspected her. She was a really nice, really nice girl. She was there was just no red flags. And that's why she got away with it for so long. So yeah, I don't know, what else to say on that matter. She's in the right place. She's in prison. She's serving her time. And that's good, because the parents are finally seeing justice for